This presentation concentrates on using the PSA to create effective technical instructions. This presentation will show how I was able to effectively create technical instructions by using the PSA by Christy Voles. So what is the PSA? PSA stands for Problem Solving Approach. It lays out steps for you to use to formulate an effective piece of communication. It can help you with any piece of communication you are trying to create. PSA is a writing formula that helps you evaluate all the steps necessary to create an effective piece of communication. This communication can help you not only communicate, but it could solve a problem or teach your audience something new. There are 5 steps to the PSA, which I will go into more detail here in a moment. First, you must plan. Second, research. Third, you will need to draft. Fourth, you will review. And last but not least, you will distribute. It is important to follow all steps in order, as this will ensure you have not missed the important steps to creating an effective piece of communication. You don't want to rush through the writing process because your ultimate goal is to portray a clear message to your audience. So, how does this PSA apply to me or you? Well, starting from the first step, we must first plan. This is a step that one should never skip. By planning, we are able to lay out what our next steps will be to ensure that we are getting our message across. So what steps did I take before beginning my technical instructions? First, I had to go through my house items trying to plan what I could use to create a Mr. Bell Pepperhead. I knew I wanted to use household items to make a real-life Mr. Potato Head, but I was out of potatoes. By brainstorming, I was able to grab household items that I would be able to use to dress up my bell pepper. Next, I had to ensure that I was able to construct my bell pepper to make it look like it had a face. Some items I had to change because they would not stay on properly. By first planning out how I was going to build my Mr. Bell Pepperhead, I was able to get the bigger picture of what I wanted to get the message across to my audience. Second, you must research. First, I needed to determine who my audience was. For this instance, it was a younger audience. Next, I determined what kind of communication would be most effective and determined when you are dealing with children, pictures of the steps are most likely the most effective. Pictures were a necessity because I did not want to use a large vocabulary since my audience was younger and may not be advanced in their vocabulary. I wanted pictures to tell the story more than words, so that way they would be able to build their very own Mr. Bell Pepperhead. The third step is creating your first draft. A first draft is very important so you're able to catch mistakes and rewrite what is not clear. Most of the time your work will not be error-free the first time. It is helpful to have another person read your work so they can communicate where you are not being clear in your message. It is helpful to have the person be aware of the goal of your communication so they are able to offer helpful advice. Next, you must review your piece to ensure it is an effective form of communication. You want to make sure that any revisions that your peers have suggested should be completed. Some of the key things to look out for with revisions are spelling and grammar, clear wording, and that you are accomplishing the goal of your communication. Distributing your work is the final step. This happens once your work is perfect and should be seen by others. The distribution process finalizes your work and begins to spread your message. Do not skip steps and jump ahead to the last part of the PSA because your communication will not be as effective as it would be if you followed all of the steps of the PSA. So why was using the PSA successful? Using the PSA was successful because I was able to communicate effectively. With the help of the PSA, I was able to make changes so that my instructions were clear to my audience. By using my instructions, kids at home or school will be able to instruct their very own Mr. Bell Pepperhead. So what did I learn about my writing? Well, during this process I learned that you do not always get it right the first time or the second. With the technical instructions, it was hard to be sure you were wording things correctly so that your audience would know what you're trying to communicate. I also learned that I am not a visual person. I prefer things in black and white with no pictures. For this assignment, it was crucial for me to use visuals for every step so that the children would be able to follow my instructions. So what did I learn about effective communication? Well, to effectively communicate, you need to analyze your audience. You may need to communicate differently depending on what your target audience is. Your message needs to be clear to your audience. You should have others review before it moves to the final stage and make as many revisions as possible to ensure that you are communicating effectively. This presentation clearly illustrates how I was able to use the PSA to effectively create technical instructions for a younger audience that would allow them to create a Mr. Bell Pepperhead of their own.